Hello and welcome to a very special interview on India Today television. Later this month, the Modi government completes 2 years in office. What are its high points? What are its low points? What are its failures? What are its successes? And how is the government perceived? Those are the issues I shall raise today with a former senior member of Atal Bihari Vajpayee's cabinet, a former editor-in-chief of the Indian Express, and one of India's most highly regarded authors and political thinkers, Arun Shourie. Mr. Shourie, let me start with a simple question. In the last 2 years, we've seen Ghar Wapsi and Love Jihad, beef bans and the returning of awards, campaigns against anti-nationalism, a focus on Bharat Mata Ki Jai, and high-profile student protests. As you perceive them, are these just disparate events, or is there a theme or a line of logic that runs through them?
Karan, how can they be disparate events? They are well-orchestrated campaigns. You see how you just see the timing and how long that campaign lasts. The moment an election is over, Ghar Wapsi is over. The moment the last vote in some election is passed, then this Love Jihad is over. This is orchestrated and well-timed, and it is kept alive by other voices. And we keep saying, oh, why does the Prime Minister not speak? And just see now how it has been sublimated in a sense. Because these so-called, cow ban, beef ban and so on were getting a recoil. So now nationalism. It is very well orchestrated.
But then if it's well orchestrated, what do you believe is the intention behind this?
To polarize people. And as I have had to remark, that this shows a tendency that the only thing that is important is win an election by any means. And as we get into greater and greater difficulties of the government, then more and more extreme things we can be quite nervous that maybe those things will get done.
So just to understand, you believe this is a deliberate attempt to polarize the country, and the intention behind polarizing is to win elections?
Is to merely win elections. There is no great dedication to either maintaining populations in particular ratios or to protecting the poor cow. I don't think so.
So this is divide and rule,
yes,
except with a different motive and intention.
Yes, divide and rule, divide, win elections and rule.
So then as you look back on the 2 years of the Modi government, what do you perceive as the characteristics of this regime as revealed by its behavior?
We should do what Mr. Modi does. These alliterations. 2 C's, 2 E's, 1 P. So it is confrontation, C. Centralization. E, events. E, second E, exaggeration. P, as we said, polarization. Between Hindus and Muslims, between this caste and that caste, and now, because these things are not succeeding, rich and poor. And we can actually, you can extend this. All these motus in government and out who run the cricket, or who ruin cricket, they can't run between wickets themselves, but they so-called run cricket. So we can give a cricketing thing also. B, bat. B for brawn, not brain. A, amoral. T, can't be tolerance. So timidity. So you do something. MAT, the tax, remember? It's going to get 40,000 crores. By this, the Indian irrigation problem will be solved. Thodi si protest hui, roll back. So, timidity.
But I noticed that you once again stressed C for confrontation,
yes,
P for polarization.
Right.
You do genuinely believe that this government is consciously and deliberately polarizing the country,
yeah,
and it is creating confrontation to create that polarization?
Yes, these are 2 sides of the same coin, and they do not see the cost. Because then, for instance, Parliament is naturally going to be polarized, partly because of your own technology. You said last time that disrupting Parliament is a parliamentary tactic. Okay, so the other fellow is being parliamentary. But now you push him again and again, so naturally he will be this way. And you are also doing it to the state governments, not just the centre.
So then what has happened to good governance? What has happened to the stress on development?
They seem to be, just incidental. We have, what is this? Where is this good governance?
You can't see it at all.
No, but for instance, don't think of individual officers. Think of administrative reform. Think of civil-military relations in the armed forces. Think of police reform. Think of the way the poor central paramilitary forces are trained, are equipped.
None of that has happened.
Nothing. So they just get blown up in Chhattisgarh.
So good governance and development were election rhetoric. It hasn't influenced the government's performance in office.
That they were merely rhetoric. But maybe they were believed, but they have certainly not been evident in the conduct of the government.
I want to very much talk about the performance of the government, particularly with specific relation to foreign affairs and the economy. But before I do that, I want to put to you something this government is particularly proud of. They say that they have been far more effective in tackling corruption than the UPA. They say there's not been a single incidence of major corruption since Mr. Modi came to power. How do you respond to that claim?
I think that's a very good point, that there is thus far not a single allegation of any minister having made money in Mr. Modi's government. Don't talk of the state governments. Mr. Modi's government. And it is very good that the government has had the good sense to follow the court's directives of auctioning scarce natural resources. But I'll tell you something, Karan, this will ultimately depend, a crusade against corruption will depend on the impartiality with which you do these things. What happened to Vyapam scam? We don't know.
It continues.
Well, but is it being pursued? We don't know. There was something about the public distribution system in Chhattisgarh. What happened? We don't know. The waxing and waning of Sharda scam, when you need Mamata Banerjee, when you don't need her. What about my friend Lalit Modi? Red corner notice, blue corner notice, non-bailable warrant, Interpol. Now, so it seems people will conclude this way, that actually speaking, these are just occasions of convenience. And you are not really fighting corruption. What happened to this Commonwealth loot? So are you pursuing it?
So you believe once again, maybe corruption as far as ministers in the central government is concerned has disappeared, but corruption in the states continues, it's unchecked and no action is being taken against it.
Not only that, but action is taken or not taken according to convenience. That's worse. I'll give you an instance. You see, you require structural reform. I'll give one point. Prime Minister made a very important pledge. I will institute procedures, I will bring about amendments in laws so that any case involving a politician is settled within 1 year. What has happened?
Nothing.
So?
Just a couple of days ago, there was a major debate in the Rajya Sabha. It lasted for 5 hours on the AgustaWestland issue. The government's key speaker was Defence Minister Manohar Parrikar, and he claimed that an invisible hand had prevented the CBI and the Enforcement Directorate from pursuing the matter. Were you impressed by Mr. Parrikar's presentation?
No. Actually, I'll come to Parrikar, but the first point is on Westland, this thing. India was a party in the lower court in Italy. The court, CBI was there, this Enforcement Director fellows were there. I asked the one person who pursued this story since 2012, Manu Pabbi, about this. We were parties there. The court held against us, it acquitted the accused. How did we decide not to appeal?
And that was the decision taken by the Modi government?
Modi government, yes. On whose advice? And Modi's, you cannot say, I did not take the decision, I did not know. Second.
About that, by the way, Mr. Parrikar was silent in Parliament, not a word of explanation.
Could be, I did. But second point there is, look at what this this High Court judge, whose judgment everybody is going on running around, has said that he received no assistance whatsoever from the government. Which government? High Court comes into the picture in Italy only when this government is in office. So Mr. Parrikar saying, or an invisible hand, like, bhaiya, look at the build-up to Parrikar's speech. He's going to reveal new facts. He's going to do this, he's going to that. Or खोदा पहाड़ तो निकला क्या?
चूहा.
चूहा नहीं, गलत. खोदा पहाड़ तो निकला इनविजिबल चूहा. ये कोई तरीका है? Or you have had now 2 years to find out some fact, and you have not found out a single fact.
So in other words, Mr. Parikar's performance was worse than a damn squib. It was a non-performance.
Well, certainly they did not. Can you recall a single fact which he has stated which was not known, which was not in the public domain before he spoke?
And he has no explanation for why his government didn't go in appeal against the trial court acquittal. And he has no explanation for the fact that when the Italian judge says the government wasn't helpful, it's Mr. Modi's government the Italian judge is talking about.
Naturally, because that judge was not even in the picture when the trial court was there. He has said on record that the only thing that happened was that they sent me printed pages of the CAG's report.
So in fact, Mr. Parikar's performance raises more questions than it answers.
Most certainly, most certainly.
At the moment, the
And
government...
not just Parikar is speaking for the government. After all, the Prime Minister in this tweeting by a Prime Minister of India tweeting. Anyhow, he has praised Parikar's speech, that it was a model of parliamentary practice.
Which it wasn't in your eyes.
But by substance भी तो होना चाहिए.
Now, at the moment, this government is caught in the middle of a political controversy as a result of the fact that it first declared President's rule in Arunachal Pradesh, and now more recently in Uttarakhand. The matter is in the Supreme Court. I want to ask you a simple question. Do you believe those two declarations of President's rule were justified, or are they a sign that Mr. Modi is beginning to regard Article 356 in the same cavalier fashion as Indira Gandhi used to?
Yes, no doubt on that. Every norm has been prostituted. After all, these are not in the spirit of the Bombay judgment. And please remember, persons who defect, they are like those fellows who leave the, that wo jo trapeze hoti hai. They leave it, they will not jump or leave that thing till they know that the other man is going to catch them. And therefore, there must have been some assurances of forming a government together. And it is not just 356, Karan. I think there is a more basic problem which is going to finish the BJP. Take it from me. The fact that you can take in any defector from another party, as happened in the Haryana ticket distribution, as now today, just see who are the two leaders of the BJP in Assam. Sonowal, my good friend from AGP, this Sarma from Congress. That means you don't have any core beliefs. It is just anybody who can help you win an election, you take him.
So A, the declaration of President's rule in these two states is unconstitutional wrong, and
in
B,
my view.
In your view, it's unconstitutional wrong.
And that, my view, will not change just because the court is doing one thing or the other.
And secondly, you're saying the way the BJP is inducting defectors will undermine the BJP itself.
Because there is no... Actually, it has undermined in that sense that there is now an announcement effect and an internalized thing in the senior people of the BJP that there is no core belief left.
No core belief left other than the desire to win whichever way.
Whichever way, and form a government whichever way.
Let's come now and focus closely on the government's functioning, and let's begin with foreign affairs, which many people believe is perhaps the Modi government's greatest success. And they illustrate this by pointing at the Modi government's relationship with Washington and perhaps Mr. Modi's personal relationship with President Barack Obama. Do you share that view that President Obama and Mr. Modi have created a new relationship and taken India-US relations to a new high?
Firstly, relationships are not determined by personal relations. Don't go by the fact that one fellow can call the other fellow Barack and the other fellow says Naren, Bhai. No, the question, as Shyam Saran once asked, was, but where is the beef? What is it that you have actually got from that relationship?
What do you believe they've got?
I don't know. Because these agreements which are being touted, I request you, I request every journalist, I request every listener, please examine these by every comma. We do not know what we are getting into. These are the agreements I had warned against at the time of the nuclear deal.
So you're saying that things like LIMO, the Logistic Exchange Memorandum of Understanding, the Civil Nuclear Liability Agreement, even the Defense Trade and Technology Initiative, all of these could end up being traps.
No, not traps. America will work for its own interests. We have to see our interests. I'll give you an instance, this logistics agreement. Does it bind us to provide bases to the Americans when they are conducting some operations elsewhere? Even if it gives us some freedom of maneuver, of saying no at that time, will we have the guts at that time to say no? Similarly, on this nuclear liability...
In that sense, it could become a trap.
Yes. And in the civil nuclear liability agreement, is it fair that Westinghouse should provide the equipment for your nuclear plant and a Chernobyl happens and they will not be liable and the Indian government will pay everything?
So,
So please examine the agreements.
These agreements are therefore both, in a sense, traps as well as unfair to India.
Could be. We should examine them. And secondly, I'll give you say Obama, you take this Afghanistan talks. These talks for peace talks are going on. We are one of the countries which has the most successful and extensive development program. We have extensive contacts in Afghanistan. We are directly impacted by what is happening there. Who are the parties in the talks? The Taliban, the Pakistan government, the Americans and China. India excluded. Did Obama raise a finger? The Pakistanis have not acted against Jaish-e-Mohammed. They have not acted on Lashkar-e-Toiba. Has America raised a finger? So what is this business of unko jhula do, unko welcome kar lo, chief guest bana lo, and you say that relations are there?
Let's come to Pakistan. It's had a lot of high profile in the relationship between the two countries in the last 2 years. But people are confused. There's even consternation. Mr. Modi's admirers are perplexed by what they see as a series of U-turns. His critics actually applaud them. How do you view Prime Minister Modi's Pakistan policy?
If you don't mind my saying so, we have made fools of ourselves in regard to Pakistan. There have been very good achievements in foreign policy, for instance, in regard to Bangladesh. But in regard to Nepal, we have pushed them to China. And in regard to Pakistan, we have made fools of ourselves. You see, these Hurriyat leaders, the High Commissioner is going to meet the Hurriyat leaders. We cancel the talks. Then he calls them for reception. We say, oh, that does not matter. Sartaj Aziz, at that time the National Security Advisor, is coming here and it's announced that he will meet the Hurriyat leaders. And we put the Hurriyat leaders under house arrest. And in 2 hours we release them.
But you mean the strong language, we have made fools of ourselves?
Oh, yes. Because, see, look at it from Pakistan's point of view. This lunatic act, absolutely lunatic act of letting a Pakistani team come and inspect your air base. What is this? Are we the guilty party? अरे जुल्म करता है दुश्मन और हम शर्माए जाते हैं.
Many people think that Mr. Modi's visit to Lahore on Christmas Day was the high point.
It was a wonderful initiative, but I complimented him. But the point is that I presume that a lot of staff work has gone on before that. उसी के बाद फिर उन्होंने दूसरी चीजें शुरू कर दी पाकिस्तानियों ने. So the point there is that and this will, I feel, this kind of thing will be China, it will be watched by Pakistan, it will be watched, and they will say, "Arey ye anadi log."
What about the relationship between Modi and Nawaz Sharif?
I think Mr. Nawaz Sharif would be also feeling कि भाई ये तो यार पता नहीं क्या करेगा अगले दिन. And Nawaz Sharif,
you're suggesting that Nawaz Sharif might feel he's been let down?
Well, I would feel that Nawaz Sharif would today be a bit nervous, supposing there is some difference of opinion. I don't know how much difference of opinion there is between him and the Pakistani army. But today, if we presume that Nawaz Sharif is for peace, he would find a sort of people jumping up and down in India here and there, and he does not know where to, what to latch on to.
So when Mr. Nawaz Sharif looks at India, there's no clarity that he sees there. He sees confusion.
I don't know if we have confused Pakistan, but I'll tell you, we have succeeded in confusing the Indians.
What about our relationship with China? Mr. Modi came to pass saying that he would be much stronger in his relationship with China. Yet when President Xi Jinping visited in September 2014, there was the Chinese incursion into Chemur, which embarrassed the Indian government. And then recently, there's been the Dolkan Isa incident, and the newspapers say maybe even 2 more. And in all 3, it seems Chinese dissidents were first granted visas, which were then, perhaps under protest from China, withdrawn. How do you view Mr. Modi's handling of China?
But it's exactly like Matt. Give the visa today, somebody frowns, take it back tomorrow. And that shows lack of consultation. Government by ilham, by revelation. But on China, it's a serious matter. I feel that the same mistake that we have been making since Panditji's time has been repeated. That is, that if I am nice to President Xi, then the dragon will become a vegetarian. मैं उनको ज़रा झूले पर लगा दूं गुजरात में. I, talk nicely to
Can
him.
I interrupt? You're saying just as Pandit Nehru got taken in by the Chinese charm, Mr. Modi is in danger of being similarly taken in?
No, it is the other way. Mr. Modi thinks that he can charm, and the Chinese will pursue their interest. I'll give you two instances. Look at the aid to Pakistan now, this corridor. And do you know, a large presence is going to be increased in the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. China, on the say-so of a very important person who knows these facts, he told me, China today is present in 20% of the old state of Jammu and Kashmir. They will say, if they have not already said, that Kashmir is not a bilateral issue, it is a trilateral issue.
You're serious about that?
Yes, absolutely. Second, that in the case of China, you look at the assistance to Pakistan, you look at their maneuvers around India, whether it's submarines or anywhere else, the opportunity which they have seized in Nepal, and we think that...
You're saying something that suggests that China is getting the better of Mr. Modi in every element of the relationship.
No, not that. But that we are not really pursuing our own interests with the focus that I thought would be the case in Mr. Modi when Mr. Modi came to office.
Let's come to the economy. After all, that is the main reason why many people voted for Mr. Modi. People believed him when he said, "Achhe din aane wale hain." Now, this time around, at this moment as we speak, the economy is growing at 7.6%. Inflation is down to 4.83%. And in 2015-16, we've had record inflows of FDI, a record 51 billion. It's led Mr. Jaitley, the finance minister, to boast that India is the world's fastest growing large economy. Do you think he's earned the right to pat himself on the back?
I don't know. These things require examination, each of them, and when you have other occasions, I'd like to go through each of these figures, like 7.6% and so on. There are many controversies regarding these things. I'll give you two general rules whenever this government puts out a figure, to remember two emblematic figures and put the new figure in that context. Vibrant Gujarat summits. It turns out that only 8% of the pledges which were made and announced with such fanfare resulted in investment. Secondly, in this last Vibrant Summit, they signed 22,000 MOUs. That means one, as P. Sainath pointed out, one MOU per 4 seconds. So please, when you get these figures, examine every single figure, keep track of every single promise, exhume every single claim of the government.
In other words, you're saying you don't believe these figures?
I would have to examine each one of them. You see, there are today small shoots, scattered shoots indicating a revival. But whether that revival is due to a normal cyclical revival or it is due to government policy is something to be examined, and the jury is out on that.
Many people were hoping that Mr. Modi would initiate far-reaching radical reforms. That was the promise he held out. That was the hope with which people voted for him. But whether you look at retrospective taxation, labor law reform, or land acquisition, or anything else, it's missing. Is that understandable given the political problems he's faced? Or do you feel this is a letdown?
No, it's of course a letdown, and partly the political problems have not just arisen on their own. Political problems have also been fomented by his style, by the style of the government as a whole.
So he's created his own problems?
Well, he's been part of the creation of the problems. So on that I would not go.
But you do...
Like Land Acquisition Act, on which the centre had nothing to do. It was not a subject of the centre. One small announcement would have left it to the states, and that was all, which is exactly what they had to do in the end, but he was misguided.
By whom?
I don't know.
But
ask him.
But the net result is mishandling.
Absolutely mishandling, confrontation with the states, ordinances passed, criticism, and in the end you have to give up that reform.
So in a word, your attitude seems to suggest that the economy has been poorly handled.
Yes, and because you see, in my mind...
Would you agree, poorly handled?
Yes, in fact not handled much at all. I think just announcements. I'll give you as I had mentioned earlier, that it's the emphasis on managing the headlines of the economy, not the economy. You see, in my view, the critical point when Mr. Modi came was to revive private investment, because that is what had fallen during the last 2.5 years of Dr. Manmohan Singh's
It clearly hasn't happened.
Not happened.
Why?
Because of two factors. One was tax reform. They needed tax administration reform. Nothing has happened on that. Secondly was on banks. On banks, 2-3 small steps have been taken. New licenses have been given. They will have an effect 5 years from now. In one bank, Bank of Baroda, 2 professionals have been brought in. Nothing else has happened. So I think that,
so there is a banking crisis in the country, and you're suggesting to me that the Modi government is inadequate in terms of what is done?
Yes, and this crisis was flagged to him before he came. I can say this from personal knowledge, before he came to Delhi.
You flagged it?
Well, yes, but others also suggested what could be done.
But he's failed to do it.
Well, he didn't think it's important, or he left it to somebody who didn't do it.
But this is very important. You're saying the Modi government didn't think it's important, or he left it to someone who could do it and that someone couldn't?
Well, couldn't or didn't.
So the banking crisis that could have been solved has got worse.
Has got much, much worse. Look at on the question of these bad loans. And this shocking story of the Indian Express, that the regulator, the Reserve Bank of India, and the figures with the Reserve Bank and with the banks are completely at variance.
So this suggests irresponsibility. When you know what you have to do and you know how to do it, but you don't do it, that's irresponsible.
Yeah, well, maybe you are distracted by other things. I don't know.
But is it irresponsible or not? Because it sounds like it.
Well, you can say, you can use that word.
But are you using it?
Certainly,
are you using it?
No, I am using the fact, yes, it is irresponsible not to act on such a grave problem. And that is what is blocking now. And today I'll tell you, no bank official will take the risk of dealing with the bad loans problem, because one size will not fit all. You will have to exercise discretion, and he will not do it because he says, unless the top fellow is prepared to take responsibility, I don't want to get.
So the problem is going to get steadily worse.
It is getting worse. Maybe there are now going to be recapitalization of banks. It was so necessary. Uday Kotak and people had flagged it 5 years ago, 4 years ago.
But it again hasn't happened.
Nothing.
This is again irresponsibility.
Well, it is just negligence, gross negligence.
Gross negligence on top of irresponsibility.
Well, certainly.
Let's take a break at that point. When I come back, I want to switch and talk about Prime Minister Modi himself. After all, he's been Prime Minister for 2 years, and more importantly, he is the most powerful Prime Minister India has had in 30 years. How do you believe he's acquitted himself in office? Welcome back. You're watching To The Point, and an exclusive, unique interview with Arun Shourie. Mr. Shourie, let's come to Narendra Modi. He's been Prime Minister for 2 years. More importantly, he is perhaps the most powerful Prime Minister India has had for the last 30 years. In your eyes, how has he acquitted himself over the last 2 years as Prime Minister?
See, it is as if you were waiting and longing for a friend to come after so many years. And he comes, and the whole evening is spent in just jhagda, boxing match with everybody. So it has in that sense been a great letdown. He has not had that focus which all of us expected of him. And therefore, I think a great opportunity has almost completely been missed.
What's gone wrong?
You know, we will do better if we'll understand him better if we slightly distance ourselves from him and look at the type of such persons and leaders. You can think in aspects of Mrs. Indira Gandhi, Jayalalitha, and so on. There is a concept in political science called the dark triad. 3 elements that make up such leaders. They can be CEOs of companies, they can be national leaders. The first is narcissism. The essence of that is, of course, not just self-love, but self-love to an extraordinary degree. But second, insecurity. See, narcissist always keeps looking in the lake to reassure himself that I'm still beautiful. As Ashish Nandi, one of our great thinkers, he told me once, Casanova has to reassure himself every night that he can still conquer.
You think that's a quality Mr. Modi has?
Well, because it gets reflected in many things. For instance, the insecurity means that you will have persons around you who are manifestly inferior. You will keep turning them, putting them into situations of uncertainty so that they are reminded you are strong. Same, it is very important. You will never have long-term, deep relationships. Your relationships will be ephemeral liaisons, because you don't want the other person to be with you long enough so as to discover that you are not what you are projecting yourself to be. So that's narcissism.
So narcissism and the Casanova quality are one legs of the dark triad. What are the other?
The second one is Machiavellianism, in which you come to look upon everybody, every institution, every idea, every ideology, every occasion as an instrument. कि भाई इसका मैं क्या इस्तेमाल कर सकता हूँ? What use can I make of this? So, an individual, anybody, your attitude is as to a paper napkin: use and throw.
You really mean that Mr. Modi looks at
I think
events
many
and
such
people,
leaders.
but he looks at them in terms of how I can use them. He looks at events in terms of how I can manipulate it.
Even tragedies. Uttarakhand floods. He flies in as chief minister. 1.5 days, stories are put out that he has rescued 15,000 Gujaratis and flown away. Floods in J&K. Announcement in 2 parts of 1,750 crores package. वो बेचारा मुफ्ती मोहम्मद सईद पैकेज की इंतजार करते करते गुजर गए.
So are you saying that's also true of Mr. Modi's attitude to the Nepal earthquake and that horrible burning in Kerala?
And yes, look at them. They had to tell the Indian media to get out. Similarly, in the case of this, the latest incident was this burning incident in the temple, that fireworks thing in Kerala. Bodies, the persons are there with, the doctors say, with 50%, 90% burns. And you come in with a posse of persons into that ward and with that indispensable figure, the cameraman.
So you're suggesting that Mr. Modi's attitude to things like the Kerala burning, the floods in Uttarakhand and Jammu and Kashmir, or the Nepal earthquake is Machiavellian?
In the sense of instrumentality, of that how can I use them as instruments for projection or whatever.
Projection of himself?
Of himself or of whatever the higher cause.
So this is then the second leg of the dark triad, what you call Machiavellianism. What is the third leg of the dark triad?
The third is remorselessness, that you are never sorry for what happens as a consequence of what you do. There's a beautiful line of Neeraj saying कि उसे तो अपने गुलदस्ते की रौनक से ही मकसद है. He is only concerned about the glow of his bouquet. कहाँ फुर्सत है गुलची को कि दर्द गुलिस्तां समझे? Where does he have the leisure or time to understand what the terror that passes through the garden as he plucks those flowers? So remorselessness, and
what
this
you're
is justified.
What you're suggesting is Mr. Modi is concerned simply about how he projects himself, not the consequences for others.
Not only Mr. Modi, but such leaders. I'd give you, and this is rationalized. Firstly, by saying, I am working for a higher cause. So collateral damages. Second is, what the ego, defense of the ego, projection. I am devious? No. Everybody is devious, therefore it is right for me to be devious and distrustful.
Is this then how you see those enormous rallies that Mr. Modi is held for NRIs in cities like London, New York, Sydney, Tokyo? Is that all self-projection?
Well, no, there is also visibility for Indian foreign policy, reminding those fellows that you see we have a constituency here, our Prime Minister. No, there are good things to that also. But there is also an element of reassuring yourself
that he matters.
That you matter and that you are loved and appreciated and applauded. That's narcissism.
So those rallies played a critical role in giving him self-reassurance that he matters.
And that may be important.
In other words, this is the insecurity that it was feeding into.
Yes, I feel it is one of the elements.
Now, last year when I interviewed you to mark the first anniversary of the Modi government, you said a Trimurti was controlling the BJP, and that Trimurti comprised Mr. Modi, Mr. Ahmed Shah, and Mr. Amit Shah, forgive me, and Mr. Jaitley. Does that Trimurti continue, or has it changed? Has it narrowed?
They're more manifestly his instruments.
So is he now more in direct and immediate control?
Yes, he's working even more directly with the civil servants and so on, and who are, not.
Is he the only person who matters?
Of course. He's the only person, but naturally these two feed him, and that must be affecting his, because one of the features that comes through when we were talking, for instance, about foreign policy and this ups and downs, these somersaults, is lack of consultation. That means he's getting input from very few persons, and therefore, and those persons are persons he has chosen because they agree with him. And therefore you get into these, these blunders.
So is this becoming some form of one-man government?
It is a one-man government, without a doubt. It's a presidential government, but without the appurtenances of inputs which, let's say, the President of the United States has,
and without
or of China.
And without the checks and balances.
Checks and balances of the United States, certainly.
So is this a dangerous situation?
Most certainly. Most certainly.
Recently, the Minister for Urban Development, Venkaiah Naidu, said Mr. Modi was God's gift to India. In your eyes, is that justified praise from a minister? Or is it reminiscent of the sycophancy of D.K. Barwa, who coined the infamous slogan, India is Indira, Indira is India?
And these others have embroidered on that. I think one MP has said that he is actually Lord Krishna himself. Another functionary of the government has said that he is not human, he is an avatar. Please remember that these sycophants work very hard to first find out what the other fellow wants to hear. And they say only that.
You're suggesting Mr. Modi wants to hear this?
They think that. No, maybe he doesn't want. Maybe he's embarrassed. I don't know. But they certainly think that he does.
We've spent so far our entire time analyzing and assessing the functioning of this government over the last 2 years. It has 3 years left. Do you expect things to change? Or let me put it differently, what sort of changes do you expect?
Well, actually speaking, as Mr. Modi is the government, and as he's not going to change, we are going to have more of the same.
Which means?
More events, more exaggeration, more polarization.
More confrontation?
More confrontation.
You really mean we'll see more of polarization and confrontation?
But certainly. I feel that. I'll give you an instance. You take, as we get closer to the UP election, just see what will happen. You'd have to have an even more potent thing than a cow. So what will be? Ram Mandir. Ram Mandir ki 4-5 eente lagwa do. Now, you start gathering those bricks and it will certainly divide society. Unnecessarily.
So you see things getting worse?
And therefore...
Am I right? You see things getting worse?
These tendencies becoming even stronger. And secondly, that will happen is, I feel that this, because there will be a recoil, there will therefore be a much more systematic attempt to curb civil liberties. And these Kanhaiya Kumar, Hardik Patel, the attempt in Maharashtra to strengthen this sedition law, these will become decentralized experiments. And I fear, what India is going towards is a sort of decentralized intimidation, in which a cloak is given, like nationalism, to the local thug, to choke the inconvenient voice in the locality.
I have to put this to you. You're suggesting that Mr. Modi is not good for India.
No, if he changes, but the direction...
But you're saying he's not going to change?
Well, yes, that's right. Therefore, I fear that. Therefore...
So you fear he's not good for India?
Not good for India is too big, we have to consider alternatives and so on. I'm saying that the direction which the government is taking under his supervision
is not good
for India.
The direction the government is taking under his supervision is not good for India.
True.
Those are very damning words.
But that's what the facts seem to indicate at the moment. I sincerely hope I am wrong tomorrow, but we shall see tomorrow.
And what's even worse is you see the situation slowly but steadily deteriorating in that direction.
Yes, that certainly, unless it is checked. And it can be checked.
So then today you are a worried man.
Yes, I'm certainly worried. No doubt on that.
Not just disillusioned, not just disappointed, but worried.
Not disillusioned, but I'm worried. Yes, certainly I'm worried.
Arun Shourie, we've got to the end of our interview, but there is one question I have to ask you, and it's one that I believe audiences want to hear you answer. Are you speaking out of hurt, pride and anger? Are you speaking like this critically of Mr. Modi because you did not become a member of his government? It was widely known, or believed at any rate, that you wanted to be finance minister in 2014. He never gave you the job. Is it hurt, pride and anger that makes you critical of him today?
Anybody who thinks that thinks very poorly of me. In any case, let them think that and then deal with the facts. But the other point I think we should remember is that supposing I wanted it and I didn't get it, but I live with that situation every day, with a wife who's not well, with a child who's handicapped. In life you do not get so many things, and you never know if you get something, what will happen. I'll tell you one thing, I'll ask you another question. That you have known me, we have known each other for how many years?
20 or 30.
Okay, 20, 30 years. Do you think I would have got along with this lot?
Probably not.
Well,
but didn't you want to be part of this lot?
No, but the point is that therefore we must compliment the Prime Minister for his far-sightedness. This fellow would not have got along, keep him out.
All right, Arun Shourie. A pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.